In 1869, the United States finished something no country on Earth had ever built: a railroad spanning an entire continent. East Coast to West Coast, one continuous track, done 7 years ahead of anything comparable anywhere else. America didn't just have a railroad, it had the best one. Today, the United States has 0 miles of true high-speed rail. Not enough. 0. Not 1 mile of dedicated track where a train legally runs above 200 miles an hour in commercial service. China, meanwhile, has somewhere between 45,000 and 50,000 kilometers of it. That's not a typo. 45,000 kilometers, built in about 20 years, on a country that didn't even have its first bullet train until 2008. And just this week, one of the people closest to actually fixing this problem walked away from the job. The president of Brightline West, the company building the one truly high-speed line under construction in America right now, a 2-hour bullet train between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, stepped down. The project she was overseeing needs $15.5 billion it doesn't currently have. So here's the real question. It's not, why doesn't America have money? It's not, why doesn't America have the technology? The country that built the fastest railroad on Earth in 1869 clearly has neither problem in some absolute sense. The question is, what actually happened between then and now? For most of the 20th century, America wasn't just competitive in rail, it set the pace. The country had the densest rail network on the planet by the early 1900s. Steam gave way to diesel. Diesel gave way to electrification on key corridors, and through the 1930s and 40s, American passenger trains were genuinely fast for their era. The rules that governed all of this, how loud a train was allowed to be, how it was built, how it was inspected, were written for that era, for trains that rarely broke 100 miles an hour. One of those rules is about noise. The federal government's train noise standards were developed using research from before 1976, back when the fastest passenger trains in the country topped out around 110 miles an hour. At that speed, almost all the noise a train makes comes from the engine and the wheels on the rail. So that's what the regulation measured: engine noise, mechanical noise. Nobody in the 1970s was writing rules for a problem that didn't exist yet. What happens to the sound of a train once it's moving fast enough that the loudest thing about it isn't the engine anymore? It's the air. That detail sat quietly in the federal code for 50 years, mostly irrelevant, because nothing in America ever got fast enough to run into it. China's first true high-speed line opened in August 2008. Beijing to Tianjin, 30 minutes, top speed 350 kilometers an hour. Before that, China didn't have a high-speed rail industry at all. It had a national railway system running at conventional speeds, planning documents from the early 1990s that studied Japan's Shinkansen and Europe's early high-speed lines, and a government that decided, essentially all at once, that this was going to be a national priority. What followed wasn't a series of separate local projects competing for funding and permission. It was one national authority, China Railway, building against a single master plan, revised and reissued every 5 years, with land acquisition backed by the central government rather than negotiated county by county. When a new line needed to cross a province, there wasn't a separate approval process for every mile of track and every landowner along the way. There was one plan, one authority, and a government structure that could move land into public use quickly, because the legal framework for doing that was already centralized. The result: by 2013, 10 years after the first dedicated line broke ground, China had more high-speed track than the entire European Union combined. By 2025, the network passed 45,000 kilometers, connecting something like 33 of China's 34 provinces. None of this happened because China discovered a new kind of steel or a faster kind of concrete. Lines like Hefei to Fuzhou, 343 kilometers, designed for 350 kilometers an hour, went from first shovel in the ground to a fully certified, revenue-generating railway in 48 months. 4 years. Start to finish. The technology wasn't the hard part. It never really is. Here's a comparison worth sitting with. The Hefei to Fuzhou line in China, 343 kilometers, designed for 350 kilometers an hour, built from nothing, new grade, new bridges, new stations in 48 months. Brightline West in the United States, 351 kilometers between Las Vegas and Rancho Cucamonga, California, designed for right around the same top speed. Groundbreaking was April 2024. The company now says it won't be finished until late 2029. That's not 48 months. That's approaching 7 years, and the completion date has already moved twice. Almost exactly the same distance. Almost exactly the same design speed. And here's the part that should make this comparison sting a little. Brightline West had the easier version of this problem. Roughly 218 of its 218 miles run inside the median of Interstate 15. That's an existing highway right-of-way the company didn't have to negotiate for, parcel by parcel, from hundreds of individual landowners. China's engineers, building Hefei to Fuzhou, had none of that advantage. They were cutting a brand new corridor through populated terrain from scratch. The easier version of the problem took longer, and it got more expensive doing it. The total cost estimate climbed from $12 billion at groundbreaking to roughly $21.5 billion by early 2026, a jump of over 120%, with the company still trying to close a $15.5 billion funding gap. Same length of track, similar top speed. One country's engineers had to build a corridor from nothing and did it in 4 years. The other had a corridor mostly ready-made and still can't say with confidence when it'll be done. Whatever is causing that gap, it isn't a shortage of asphalt to build next to. It would be easy to conclude the problem is private companies. Brightline West is privately financed, chasing federal loans, juggling bond deadlines. Surely a public agency, backed by a state government, would move faster. California has been trying exactly that since 2008. Voters approved just under $10 billion in bonds that year for a system originally projected to cost $45 billion, connecting Los Angeles and San Francisco. The current strategy isn't even the full system anymore. It's a scaled-down first phase, 171 miles between Merced and Bakersfield, and the current low-end estimate for just that segment is $34.76 billion, with a target completion of 2033. On June 1st, 2026, the California High-Speed Rail Authority did reach a real milestone. It awarded a $3.5 billion contract to a joint venture, Kiewit, Stacy Whitbeck, and Herzog, to actually lay track and install the electrical systems on a 119-mile starter segment. Today, the conversation changes, the authority's board chair said at the meeting. Track and system construction is the moment this project truly begins to become a railroad. The authority's CEO called it, without exaggeration, the first true high-speed rail line under construction anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. That announcement came 18 years after voters approved the bonds. Public money, private money, different sources, different accountability structures, different companies involved, and both paths arrived at roughly the same place. A project that cost multiples of its original estimate, running years past its original deadline, still not finished. If the problem were really just government is too slow or private companies are too greedy, you'd expect one of these two very different approaches to have broken through by now. Neither has. Before going further, it's worth defending the parts of this system that look inefficient from the outside, because they're not accidents. The reason a highway median-based route like Brightline West still took years of environmental review, even without buying private land, is the same reason China's approach would be nearly impossible to replicate in the U.S. A legal framework that requires public comment, environmental impact studies, and multiple layers of state and federal sign-off before a shovel goes in the ground. Those requirements exist because a single national authority overriding local objections and moving land into public use on a 5-year plan is, by design, exactly what the American system was built to prevent. The friction isn't a bug that slipped in unnoticed. It's the mechanism doing what it was built to do: protect property owners and give affected communities a legal say, and it happens to be expensive and slow as a side effect. The federal government's own actions in 2026 reflect a real, coherent position on this, not a contradiction. Earlier this year, the Department of Transportation canceled roughly $4 billion in grants to the California High-Speed Rail Authority and ended federal support for a proposed Dallas to Houston line. At the same time, on July 31st, the same department announced it would modernize the 50-year-old noise standards that had been quietly sitting in the federal code since before 1976, the ones written for trains that never got fast enough to make the rule matter. FRA Administrator David Fink put it plainly. One of the reasons we don't have true high-speed rail in the United States is because current rules disadvantage trains that generate most of their noise from sources other than their engines and rolling stock. Transportation Secretary Sam Duffy framed the broader goal directly. We're making it attractive to businesses and investors to partner with USDOT and develop high-speed rail here in the U.S. Pull back the public money. Loosen the regulatory friction for private capital. That's not two contradictory signals. That's one philosophy, applied consistently. This administration doesn't think the government should be the one building it, but it also doesn't want 50-year-old rules getting in the way of someone else who wants to try. Which brings the story back to who's actually trying. Just days before this video, the president of Brightline West, the private company positioned to benefit most directly from that regulatory change, stepped down, with a $15.5 billion funding gap still unresolved and a federal loan application still awaiting a decision with no announced timeline. The rules just got easier. The money didn't show up on schedule anyway. So why does the country that built the fastest railroad on Earth in 1869 have 0 miles of true high-speed rail today, while China built 45,000 kilometers of it in 20 years? It isn't money. Both the private and the public path have had access to tens of billions of dollars, and both spent it. It isn't technology. The trains, the track designs, the electrification systems, none of that is a mystery anyone needs to solve from scratch. And it isn't a simple story of public failure versus private failure, because both approaches, run by very different people with very different incentives, hit the same wall at almost exactly the same speed. What China had that neither Brightline West nor California ever had is one authority that didn't change its mind. A single planning body, operating on a rolling 5-year plan, that stayed in charge of the same goal for 2 straight decades regardless of who held political power. The land acquisition process didn't restart with a new governor. The funding didn't get pulled and then partially restored under a different administration's different priorities. The noise standard, if it needed updating, got updated by the same body that was building the railway, not by a separate regulator working through a comment period, nobody involved in construction controls. America has the money. America has the engineers. What it has never had, for longer than the 50 years that noise rule sat untouched in the federal code, is one authority that can start a high-speed rail project and still be the one finishing it 20 years later. Do you think a project like this can actually get built in America under the current system? Or does it need something closer to what China has? A single authority insulated from every election cycle. Tell me what you think below. If the infrastructure story you thought was about engineering turned out to be about who's allowed to finish what they start, there's a lot more of that coming. Subscribe, and we'll keep going.